Dwayne
we want to give our panelists a chance to ask more questions. So, Chuck Williams, it is your turn to ask a question, Mr.
It's insane.
Governor, the Democrats have controlled the U.S. Senate for 2 years because Georgia shifted from 2 Republicans to 2 Democrats in January of 2021. One of those seats was held by Kelly Loeffler, a person you appointed to that post. She then lost to Senator Warnock. Do you wish you had made a different choice when you selected Kelly Loeffler?
Well, no, not at all. I mean, I was excited about her candidacy. I know she worked extremely hard. It was a very challenging environment in 2020. And I think it goes to the point that in 2020, watching that election, I learned a lot of lessons. You know, a lot of the things that we haven't been doing with the ground game from a political perspective, we are now doing. Making sure that when we're campaigning, that we're making sure what we know the differences are with the candidates, but also we got to be for something. And what I'm for is doing another $1 billion tax rebate, for doing property tax relief grants, for continuing to strengthen rural Georgia and run rural broadband like we have been doing, that we started this program long before the pandemic hit. Doing economic development projects where 74% of the investment of over $30 billion over the last 2 record years is going to rural Georgia. Over half the, 80,000 jobs that are going with those projects outside the 10 metro counties in rural Georgia. And I'm committed to doing that in the future.
Mr. Hazel, if you would like to have 30 seconds, you may.
Thank you very much. The state of Georgia needs a governor who understands econ. The $200 trillion of unfunded liability in this country, as a veteran, understanding that we have a veterans health care system that is in shambles. They treat you as a liability, and they will throw pills at you every chance they get. They won't actually address your health. There is no way on earth we're going to expand that to the rest of the 99% of the country. It's a fairy tale, and it doesn't exist. That's why the economy is collapsing, because they continue to print trillions and trillions of dollars and hike interest rates at the same time.
Thank you very much.
Policies like that are going to do the same.
Thank you. Jennifer Bellamy, it's your turn to ask a question.
This question is for each of you. What do you see as the biggest challenge facing Georgia and Georgians, and how do you think it should be addressed? What will you do as governor to address that challenge?
Let's start with you, Stacey Abrams.
Gang crime is up. Gun violence is up. Housing prices have skyrocketed. Equity investors have purchased 30% of the homes in the state of Georgia. We have 1.4 million people without health insurance who cannot see a doctor when they need one. We live in a state of fear. And this is a governor who, for the last 4 years, has beat his chest but delivered very little for most Georgians. He has weakened gun laws and flooded our streets. He has weakened our privacy rights and women's rights. He has denied women the access to reproductive care. The most dangerous thing facing Georgia is 4 more years of Brian Kemp. We need a governor who actually understands the math and the morality. We need to understand that, yes, we have veterans, like Mr. Hazel pointed out, who can't get access to health care, in part because they're not fully covered by VA benefits and will only get health insurance if we expand Medicaid. We have seniors who are being forced out of their homes because this governor refuses to address the issue of housing crises. In fact, he told an audience that he didn't want to upset investors by giving local authorities control over housing prices, letting them address the issues. We need a governor who will do more for more Georgians.
I want to give each one of them a chance to answer Jennifer's question. Shane Hazel.
The biggest problem facing us is the economy. But to quote the great Rothbard, the man who puts all the guns and all of the decision-making power into the hands of a central government and then says, limit yourself, is he truly the impractical utopian? The idea that the economy isn't the biggest problem that we have in Georgia is because people don't understand economics. These guys don't understand economics from Republicans or Democrats, or else we wouldn't be in the hole that we're in terms of trillions and trillions of dollars. What we need to do is get back to basics, Austrian economics, where we get rid of this cancer that has invaded every transaction that we have through a fiat currency system, creating freedom for everybody in Georgia is the default position. Not more government, not more programs, not more policies, not more point at the barrel of a gun, force and coercion. It is freedom.
All right. Brian Kemp, your answer to the question.
Well, I'll first, since I didn't get a rebuttal after being called out, would just let Georgians know again that my record's being attacked because Ms. Abrams doesn't want to talk about her own record. If you look at what the state of Georgia and our First Lady, Marty Kemp, has done to raise the awareness on ending human trafficking, going after the perpetrators and supporting the victim, as well as us working with the General Assembly to give Medicaid benefits to birthing mothers up to a year after having that child and other things, shows you our state that we value life and that we care. But in the future, my focus is going to be what it was when I opened the debate, and that is helping you fight through 40-year high inflation and disastrous policies in Washington, D.C. I would remind you that Stacey Abrams campaigned to be Joe Biden's running mate. She supports these policies that have raised taxes on hardworking Americans and Georgians when they promised they would not. We're working with the General Assembly to help you fight through that by suspending the gas tax and giving your money back
Thank you
put
very
in your
much.
pocket.
Thank you very much. Greg, your next question.
Governor, I want to stay with you and talk about something that just came up in the last exchange a little bit. Earlier today, you rolled out a new public safety plan that offers a crackdown, promotes a crackdown on criminal offenses. What it doesn't specifically address is gun violence. Your critics say that your permissive gun policies will only lead to more crime. What do you propose you will do in a second term if you're reelected to address gun-related crimes?
Well, again, we're going after the people that are doing these gun-related crimes. I mean, and that's what we're doing, going after street gangs in this regard. You know, during the pandemic, when I was talking to people about how we were responding and what we were dealing with, I was hearing from educators and athletic directors and other people saying, Governor, we got to get our kids back in the classroom because we're losing them. We're going to lose them a decade of children because these kids that we're recruiting when they're 13, 14, 15 years old to be on the ball field or be in the band or be on the robotics team or what have you, extracurricular activity, they're being recruited by street gangs because they're not in the classroom. So those are the kind of things that we are focused on to make sure that these kids are under the right environment. And my new public safety plan is stiffening penalties for gang members that are recruiting our children. And I believe that most Georgians support that, and I'm committed to working with all law enforcement to make a dent there.
Thank you. Chuck Williams.
This is for Governor Kemp and Ms. Abrams. Columbus, Macon, Atlanta, and other communities have benefited from a Georgia State Patrol task force that has helped augment police coverage in those cities and some others over the last year. What can be done to make sure that local agencies that are short on officers can handle these policing duties without having to rely on the state? Ms. Abrams?
Well, you actually asked Mr. Kemp first.
I said for both. Okay,
yeah, it's for both.
Governor.
Yeah, look, I'm glad that answer that question. The crime suppressing unit that I asked Colonel Wright to put together during civil unrest when I grew tired of local elected political leaders that wouldn't let their local law enforcement go after dangerous people during civil unrest, that had no chase policies, where street racers and street gangs are terrorizing our citizens. I told Colonel Wright I wanted a plan, I wanted to know how much it's going to cost, and I want to know who we're going to work with. And so that's why the State Patrol, GBI, Department of Natural Resources, game wardens, working with the Fulton County Sheriff, who's helped us with jail facilities, the Atlanta Police Department, we went and put a plan together to start going after street racers and going after violent criminals and have more boots on the ground. We've done the same thing in Columbus, we've done it in Macon, we've done it in Savannah, and we'll do it wherever we're needed. This is not our job. We're using funds from the governor's emergency fund to help pay for these dollars. And thankfully, the General Assembly supports that because we've been in the fight when others were not.
Thank you. Ms. Abrams.
Street gangs did not shoot 6 Asian women going into a gun store, getting a weapon, and murdering women in less than an hour. Street gangs aren't the reason people are getting shot in grocery stores and in parking lots and at schools. Street gangs are one part of the problem, but we have a governor who has weakened gun laws across this state, flooded our streets with guns by letting dangerous people get access to those weapons. Georgia does not have a waiting period. We do not have universal background checks. And one of the few permits that we had that was helping keep us safe stopped 5,000 people who should not have had weapons from getting them, got weakened by this governor with his criminal carry law. As the next governor, my intention would be to actually give the people who do 90% of law enforcement the support they need. We know that they have asked for at least $136 million so they can recruit and retain officers. I am the only candidate who's put in place a plan for at least $25 million in grants, not loans, to go to these local law enforcement officers so they can recruit and retain officers so that their officers aren't working 2 or 3 jobs simply to make ends meet.
Thank you. Before your rebuttal, Governor Kemp, Shane Hazel, you may respond to this question.
You keep going back to guns, Stacey, and I think it's going to be your undoing here in Georgia. Georgia, we're going to have less and less gun laws, whether it's under Republicans or Libertarians. Libertarians don't believe in any gun laws. We believe that you know how to best protect you and your property. And the biggest mass murderer in history is government. It's not private citizens. Most private citizens, like I said before, go throughout their day without doing any harm to anybody. However, the people in the government with all of the guns still go after people with a badge when they shouldn't have to. In Holly Springs, Georgia, I introduced the Helios Initiative, where we got rid of civil asset forfeiture. It was a one-page bill through decentralization, nullification, using the Constitution that made the officers in Holly Springs safer because they don't have to go out there and they don't have to harass people of color while driving while black. They don't have to go out there and look for drugs. They don't have to go out there and do any of these things because civil asset forfeiture is also the government stealing more than criminals, hardened criminals, from anybody and everybody in the state of Georgia.
Thank you. Governor Kemp, 30 seconds.
Well, thank you. I would just let people at home know the largest, fastest growing segment of the population that's buying handguns and firearms is African Americans and females. You know why? Because the criminals are the only ones that do have the guns. You have local governments that are holding up concealed weapon permits that are keeping law-abiding citizens from being able to simply use their Second Amendment right to protect themselves and their property and their families. I will certainly support that.
Thank you.
Mr. Hazel, may I respond?
Yes, 30 seconds.
Let's be clear. I believe that we can protect the Second Amendment and protect second graders at the exact same time. That means that, yes, more people are buying guns, but that's because they think that's the only way to protect themselves because guns have flooded our streets. These are communities that want to be safe. They don't want to have to carry weapons. I know how to shoot. My great-grandmother taught me. But I know that the person who is most responsible is the person who holds the weapon. And that is why I will quote Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. And because of the criminal carry law that Brian Kemp signed into law, there is no longer a background check for those who have concealed carry permits. That makes all of us less safe.
How are you going to take the guns?
Don, if I could respond.
How is she going to take the guns? That's a great
really
question.
Want to move on.
Well, there is a federal background check. There's a federal background check on every individual that buys a firearm in the United States of America.
Which shouldn't exist either.
That is not true,
well, the point,
Mr. Kemp, that's not true.
I understand the point you're making, but the point is, when you buy a firearm, you get a background check.
Mr. Kemp,
none of the laws
changed.
Mr. Kemp, if you purchase a weapon in Georgia through a gun sale or a private sale, through a gun show or a private sale, you're not subject to that.
We're going to have to move on.
I interrupted you tonight.
I apologize.
Candidates, we have to move on. I'm going to allow Jennifer to ask, what's going to be the final question in this round?
A study recently showed frustration among our nation's teachers with political interference into education, with issues like COVID-19 and critical race theory presenting additional challenges to a profession that's already dealing with low pay, falling interest, and people leaving. What would you do specifically as governor to recruit, retain, and empower educators for schools across the state of Georgia, for each of you?
Shall I?
All right, we'll start with you, Ms. Abrams.
And let me again apologize to Mr. Kemp for interrupting. This is a very important topic to me, and I apologize for my outburst. I will say that when it comes to education, we know teachers are leaving the workforce. We have a 67% retention rate, but 70% of our teachers have said they would not recommend teaching to their colleagues. That is because of low pay, because of overregulation, because of high stress, and because they believe that they are being told to teach to a curriculum that does not reflect the values and needs of our students. When a teacher is told that you have to lie to a child which is what happened with the divisive language, the divisive concepts legislation. Teachers are not being able to teach the whole history of our students. They're not able to tell their children what they need to know. As the next governor of Georgia, I will repeal those laws. I will increase pay, and I will make certain that all of our teachers can start and continue through their time well paid and well protected and well supported by the government.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so only 45 seconds. So, Brian Kemp?
Well, I would just say this is exactly why I did the $5,000 teacher pay raise that I ran on in 2018. We've also done a Parents' Bill of Rights to have parents fully engaged with their schools to make sure that they know what's happening in their kids. Quite honestly, people are tired of their kids being indoctrinated in the classroom. But we've also worked with our educators on these pieces of legislation to make sure that they make good common sense. But I would also tell you that people are tired of these issues like not having fairness in girls' sports and other things. And quite honestly, it's woken a lot of people up. So we got to continue to have good conversations like we've done with our teacher pipeline legislation, like we're doing with helping 9,000 parapros get fully certified to be in the classroom.
Thank you very much. Shane Hazel, you get 45 seconds.
Your question raises a lot of interesting points. A lot of these teachers, like my own wife, has left the profession of teaching to homeschool, to go to private school, to do something outside of this narrative where admin from the federal government and the state government is forcing them to teach things they don't want to teach to test. They can't stand the administration who makes six figures. It is bloated. It has absolutely gotten out of control. We need to nullify property tax. We need to let people get out of the system. We need to allow the private sector to work, because before education was put under the thumb of government here, we had some of the brightest, most well-read people in the entire world, and that's what we need to bring back.
All right, thank you very much. We are running out of time, so that is all the time we have for questions.